We're live! Woohoo!
We're live. It's just you and me, Tim.
Yes, well, strictly speaking, you're put the guest hat on today. You're not co-host, are you?
I'm in the guest seat. How am I going to do this? I'll try not to talk until you
Yeah,
ask me a
well,
question.
yeah. I don't know if I have to remember I have to ask you questions and then ask you another question and not alternate. Or as generally seems to happen, sometimes you go off and ask about 6 questions in a row, and I'm like, oh, right, am I going to get to ask a question? So this whole interview, as I say, I've got the mic down here, so I end up drifting down to the mic. Let's talk about your new stroke old job, because you used to work for this company, this non-profit called Travelling Stories a long time ago, didn't you?
I did.
And now you're back working for Travelling Stories. And I know you've always been very infused by it as the aims of Travelling Stories. So let's talk a bit about what is Travelling Stories and why are you so enthusiastic about it?
Why am I so enthusiastic? In fact, Tim, I think we actually started connecting when I worked at Traveling
Yeah.
Stories prior. I worked at Traveling Stories in 2018 and 2019, I believe, right before lockdown hit.
Yeah.
But what Traveling Stories does is they have a mission to make children's dreams come true through the power of literacy. And they aim to do that with the hope that reading will be fun for children. And the hope is also that children in grades first through third will begin to enjoy reading. And if we capture them in that age group, it will last a lifetime and they will continue to want to read. And of course, reading and literacy affects a person their entire lifetime. It affects whether they're going to go into college. It affects what kind of job they're going to get. I mean, it affects sometimes it's life and death. You can read your way out of situations. You can learn from the past and from the future. And even lessons we learned from fairy tales. We learned so much about overcoming the monsters in our own life, whatever those might be, simply by reading fairy tales. So our goal really is to make reading fun at Traveling Stories. And how does that even happen? How in the world do you try to make reading fun for a child who might be a reluctant reader? One of the ways we do this is through a book buck program. And so prior to lockdown, Traveling Stories was entirely in person. We had story tents set up throughout San Diego, and children would come. They would read with volunteers, and they would earn book bucks. That was pretend money that they could actually hold in their hand, and they would be able to purchase prizes with those book bucks. Well, now we're completely online. Of course, lockdown changed a lot of things for a lot of organizations. So Traveling Stories is a virtual reading program. And so the children are able to still earn book bucks, but it's more like a point system. So even though we still call it book bucks, they earn a point system. They add up their points, and eventually by reading, they get to purchase prizes, and they pick out their prizes with their reading mentors. So our volunteers who read with children are called reading mentors. The children bond with these people over a period of 9 weeks. Basically, they join a rigorous but fun reading program with our volunteers, our reading mentors, and they pick out books. They earn prizes. And of course, just choosing those prizes and trying to earn enough book bucks to get those prizes is really fun for them. So that's one way. And of course, there's all reading levels. There's children who sit there and don't want to read. There's different levels of enthusiasm. So we work with that too. If it means we have to sing songs or count pictures or count colors or pull up literary games, we don't have to only read books. We can find other ways to make literacy fun for the children.
Okay. We've already had a comment. Good work.
Thank you, John.
Here. And so is this, I mean, previously you were based in San Diego because physical needs, but is this US only, or is this global now? Like, what kind of places does Travelling Stories deal with now it's post-lockdown?
Now that it's virtual. So right now we have children throughout the United States. I'll backtrack a little bit. Let me tell you the history of how Traveling Stories even started, because in some capacities we're global, but in other capacities we are nationwide. Traveling Stories was actually founded in 2010 by Emily Moberly. I can't speak this morning. I'm having tongue twisters. Emily Moberly is the founder and the visionary behind this. And the story, as best I can tell it, it's always much more fun to hear it from her and to hear her heart behind it. But basically, she was a teacher in Honduras, and she found out that children do not have the same access to books that we might here in the United States.
Yeah.
And so one of the things she did to make reading accessible when she was in Honduras is she went home, brought books back, and asked the children to choose a book that they might enjoy and encourage them to read it. And over time, these children ended up enjoying reading. In fact, one of my favorite stories happened only recently. I interviewed one of her students who wants to be a volunteer, a reading mentor with Traveling Stories. And that goes back to her days in Honduras. And that really is testament to Emily's passion behind this. So fast forward a little bit, she came back to San Diego, and people encouraged her by saying, Emily, we need this reading program here in San Diego. There's children who also have literacy needs and who could benefit from something like this. And so she kind of encouraged her family and friends and said, if you help me, I can make this happen, but I need your help and I'm going to need your financial support. And she was able to get the backing. Prior to lockdown, we had 6 story tents throughout San Diego. They were literally pop-up story tents that occurred at farmers markets and malls, strategically located throughout San Diego. We had children come read with reading mentors and earn their prizes. And we have several libraries around the entire world.
Yeah.
So with that said, lockdown happened and we had to go virtual. So around that time, I actually left Traveling Stories. They went virtual. They did this immediately into lockdown and were able to maintain a program. By the time I came back in August and then full-time in October, they already had a virtual program going. And of course, it'll only get better as we go along. I believe in 2022, Traveling Stories had 240 children in the program, and they do span the United States. We are not worldwide. We are United States. However, the children are primarily in San Diego still. If the word gets out to someone across the nation, we now can say yes, they can come to the reading program. They can be part of the Traveling Stories community and read with their reading mentor. We don't have to say no because we're virtual now. So we do have children across the nation, but again, primarily San Diego. We really reach out to the San Diego community. We love being part of a local community. We are a very small organization, and we like that because we still have the community feel while being part of our local community. So we've had a lot of fun working with community organizations. In fact, the hat I'm wearing right now, it says Literacy for All. This comes from the San Diego Council for Literacy. And that organization networks and works with literacy programs throughout San Diego. So just being part of Traveling Stories means we get to be part of an entire literacy organization. And again, Tim, that's kind of why we started chatting, because you're an author and you run Twitter. What is it called? Twitter chat.
In the author Twitter chat. So the Indie Author Twitter chat.
And you're very involved with literacy across the pond. So that's kind of why we started chatting. You pulled up our website, which is travelingstories.org. Our impact since 2020, 430 children empowered, 2,579 hours of one-on-one reading support facilitated, 337 volunteers trained. We have 5 paid staff members, and we're able to have this kind of impact. And I want to say one of the reasons why is because we have so many volunteers who have a heart and passion to read with children and make a difference in the community, and who have kind of caught the vision of why literacy is so important and why literacy and falling in love with reading can change the trajectory of someone's life. So you kind of brought that up here.
Annoying people scrolling the website while you're talking.
I'm
looking to say. So, not mean to be political here, but I know there are some people who will say, shouldn't the government be doing this kind of thing in the US? Shouldn't government be the thing that's paying for all these literary programs? Why do we need a non-profit to do that? What would be your answer to that?
That's a great question, Tim. And shouldn't the government be paying to feed all of our hungry children? Shouldn't the government be paying to give us free hospital care?
Yeah.
You know what? We live in the United States and we just don't get that. That's my simple answer. At some point, we have to take the power in our own hands when we see there's a problem, and we have to make things work, and we have to, I'm going to be, I speak like this. I just do, and I can't help it. But we have to give what we can to our children and give them the power that we know comes from literacy. And we do the best we can with the tool we have at Traveling Stories. Again, Traveling Stories helps children fall in love with reading. We are not a tutoring organization. We do not teach children to read. But the cool thing is, we are networked with, I want to say, 34 different literacy organizations throughout San Diego. I believe the majority are probably nonprofits. Some are libraries, which is really cool. And many of them are able to tutor and teach children to read. So just being networked like this, we can refer out and they can refer in. And simply sitting with a child and reading means they're being introduced to stories and literary facts and learning about life and culture. And I like to say, Tim, what does literacy teach the most? It teaches that humanity is more alike than different. And I think that is really powerful. And I think that is the magic of literacy, at least where I'm coming from. But again, just simply being able to read. We can read our way out of situations because we keep learning and learn how to be better humans. Your question was, should the government be paying for this? I mean, yes.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I suppose, to small state people, and I think something that from what my understanding of what Traveling Stories does, is that you give children the choice of books to read. They have
Absolutely.
a choice. And anybody, I mean, I don't know about what education is like in the US at school, but often you end up forced to read particular books. And like, I wasn't especially somebody who liked reading. I remember having to read lots of really boring, dense, or not particularly appealing books when I was at school. So I think something like Traveling Stories, where you have a selection of books where you're not prescribing that people have to read this 17th century book, or the worst is something like Shakespeare, where Shakespeare is fantastic on the stage, but reading Shakespeare can be, for most people, is deadly boring. Some people love Shakespeare, but a lot of people don't. So I think what something like Traveling Stories is, you give a way for people to get into reading, or children to get into reading, because their problem is not necessarily with literacy and reading, but it's the content, the subject matter that's thrown in front of them. So being able to choose your own books is really actually quite important. And a lot of people from poorer backgrounds just don't have that choice.
It could be, yeah, it could be part of the problem. There could be learning challenges. There could be all kinds of reasons. But being able to capture their attention, oftentimes when a child can even read with the same person week after week, just forming that bond with someone and building a relationship with someone makes them want to keep coming back. They have someone to read with them. And that's really important. A lot of children throughout the world don't have someone to read with them. And just that reading time alone with another person who cares builds confidence in reading and builds those feelings of being accepted and belonging. And I have this time now with someone. It's almost like a big brother, big sister thing. It could be building a relationship. But in this case, we read. And so again, if children don't necessarily want to read a book, there's always other ways to help them gain literacy skills, but hopefully like reading words. So there's so many literacy games out there and word games and other ways to capture a child's attention. And it really depends on the child and the reading mentor, how they develop the bond, what they discover together. But like you said, a lot of children don't like to read. We do allow them to choose the books they want to read. I had a child I actually read with several weeks ago, and she only wanted to read books with real animals. I tried to suggest cartoon type animals, and no,
Yeah.
she was not having it. It had to be real animals. And once we pulled those books, she was thrilled to be reading. And every child has their own likes and their dislikes, and it's up to the reading mentor and the child to figure out what that is. Traveling Stories does train our volunteers. We have a really good training program, and we're actually building upon that as we go. We're learning a lot having this new virtual system and learning about training better and allowing people to come and ask questions and learn from each other. We have a goal to have workshops in the coming year where educators can come train us and train our community. How do we read with neurodiverse children? I'm neurodiverse myself. How do we read with people like me, children like me? How do we read with children who have trauma in their background? How do we make reading fun for them? So our goal in the future and in this coming year actually is to really bring people who can facilitate and educate in that capacity into workshops. And hopefully that helps reading be fun for children and even families who are struggling with a child who is a reluctant reader. Tim, I have a question for you. I'm going to turn the tables, even though I'm the one being interviewed. What made you actually start to like reading? Because you're now an author. I mean, you've published several books. You enjoy reading. We talk about reading quite a bit.
To be honest, I would have said even until probably in my late 20s, I wasn't much of a reader because I didn't used to read that much, let alone write books. Ironically, though, I was thinking like the thing that mainly when I was a kid got me into reading was actually Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Because you had to read all the manuals and you had to read all the things, and I didn't really read much in the way of stuff really outside that. I always read a lot of non-fiction, a lot of like self-help and business and stuff. I think I would have been like an internet business guru person in my 20s if it had been available, but it wasn't then. So yeah, that's why I was very much focusing on when you were saying like you give people a choice, because reading as a skill is fundamental, but for a lot of people, their exposure to reading is for stuff that doesn't interest them. And that probably ties in a bit with the neurodiversity part of things. But I think for even like the most neurotypical person does not want to, if they've given a choice between something they enjoy and something they don't enjoy, they'll go for the thing they want to enjoy. So that's why reading has to be for something that you actually value, not something that you're just forced to do because you're told to read this, like Charles Dickens or whatever.
Absolutely.
I mean, the irony is like I think it was in my 30s actually, I started to feel like I had to go back and read all these classic books. And I did go through and read quite a lot of books. I struggled with things like Ulysses. I didn't finish, for example. I don't think anybody normal has finished Ulysses. And I struggled all the way through reading Plato's The Republic, which is a very interesting and profound book, but it's really hard to read. And lots of political stuff and other stuff. I think a lot of reading is finding out what your topic is that you're interested in, and then it's that finding that if you actually find something you want to read and you read it, that's where reading takes off in a person.
Yeah.
But I think there's too much of this. If you don't like reading anything, then you don't like reading, and it's like, well, that's not true. Reading is just a thing you do to get to the information. But if you don't like the book that's put in front of you, then that can put a lot of people off reading. So that's why I think something like Traveling Stories is actually a fantastic idea for a child.
It's why we try to, our tool, knowing that there's many other tools out there to teach children to read, to tutor, is to help them fall in reading so that hopefully later on in life, we can read those maybe not so pleasant books, or the things we need to read to graduate college, or the business journals we need to learn about to do our business correctly. I had a reluctant reader, and I had no idea how to get him to read. My middle son was a reluctant reader. And I went to his English teacher one time and finally said, I don't know what to get him to read. He does not want to read. He does not enjoy it. What do I do? And he said, you know what? Even if he just wants to read comic books, at least he's reading.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the mission of Traveling Stories. If they just want to read comic books, at least they're reading and they're enjoying it. And perhaps later on in life that will change to something else. Like I said, there's children who only want to read certain kinds of books or read about certain kinds of topics. For me, I fell in love with reading when I could sit in my room and read along with my record player and read. I had favorite stories that I like to read along with. And it was that kind of story where you would read it, and then when it was time to turn the page, the record would ding, ding, and you could turn the page. That's when I fell in love with reading. And eventually I liked reading the Iliad and Odyssey in middle school. That was introduced to me. I loved it. I used to read a lot of fictional type books. And then at some point in my adult life, for some reason, I'm in a phase of only reading nonfiction and self-help books. But I'm realizing, you know what, I need to go back to reading fiction. And it's funny, when you read children's books as an adult, you start to see various new themes and life lessons in those children's books. And to me, that's an awesome thing to consider when reading with children. There's life lessons in fairy tales. There's life lessons in children's books. Matilda, one of yours, Tim, one of the British.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, I didn't write a book called Matilda.
Some of those books that come from England, there's such powerful messages behind. It's a children's book, but there's powerful messages in those stories. I didn't read Matilda until recently. Didn't realize some of the messages there. So I've been introduced to some children's books as an adult.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like there's often undertones in books, like The Wizard of Oz was all supposed to be going off the gold standard or something. It was supposed to be an allegory. Allegory. I always get them mixed up. What like metaphor, allegory, thing. I should know the difference, but I don't. But yeah, I mean, there's so, and you're right. Fiction can have real lessons, but I mean, also there's the entertainment value of it. I mean, it's just another, because books are cheap relative compared to virtually any other form of entertainment. Like, what else can you spend like $5-10 on and have like a couple of weeks potential entertainment from? There's so little out there, and yet but then you could argue that I wouldn't want to live in a world where books were actually cost the amount of entertainment they gave relative to, say, a video game or a mobile phone game or something like that, or a cup of coffee.
I would even say avid readers learn life lessons like compassion and empathy. People who are willing to read all levels of books and various topics. I mean, that's the power of literacy, learning compassion and empathy. There's so many reasons behind the importance of literacy. But Tim, you're also an author, and some of the things that I've heard is that to be a really good writer, you should be an avid reader. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I would tell you from some of the books that I've done that haven't performed well is because I haven't read well in that genre. I should probably write a few self-help books. My last book was a bit self-helpish, but it was about social media. Yeah, I mean, there's arguments for. There are some authors who don't like reading in their genre because they're worried that it will influence their story writing. So, if they they write like zombie fiction or something, they won't read any other zombie fiction because they're worried that those ideas will get into their book. I'm not really sure that's true. I think for most people, unless you started out as an avid reader and fan of a particular genre, you would need to read that topic to actually be able to write it, to know what people expect. So what the kind of tropes are, so to speak, of that particular genre. So anyway, let's get back to interviewing you again.
I can't help but ask.
No. I mean, it's interesting to talk about books and literacy. I mean, the irony is that my dad worked on where most of his he worked on like he was draftsman and he did like a lot of stuff with machines and the like. But he worked for a company that built printing machines for books and the like. And my mum used to work in publishing, so ironically, it's kind of I went back into what my family was involved in, even though there was never any kind of like, oh yeah, let's work in this area, because that was never there. I was, me and my brother were the first people in my family to go to university, so it was kind of like you do what you do sort of thing. Anyway, so back to traveling stories. What would, if somebody wanted to be involved in traveling stories, they wanted to either help in terms of funds or they wanted to volunteer, how can people help and contribute to traveling stories quest in the world, so to speak?
Absolutely. One way is we always need reading mentors, people who want to volunteer, be part of the community, or want to just read with children and make a difference in their life that will last generations. Once a child loves reading, they're going to read to their own children. This is a generational thing. So we need reading mentors. If anyone across the United States wants to be a reading mentor, simply go to travelingstories.org, find the volunteer part. You can even go travelingstories.org/volunteer, pull that up and apply to be a reading mentor. If you're a family who has a reluctant reader and your child is in 1st through 3rd grade and you live in the United States, sign them up to be part of our reading program. Again, go to travelingstories.org and sign up to be part of the reading program. Again, your child does need to be in 1st through 3rd grade. That's where we focus on. And then we always need financial support. We need the help of people across the world really to keep this program running. Without financial support, we can't do what we do. So we are in the middle of a big fundraising campaign. Like most nonprofits, the end of the year is our big fundraising campaign. Our campaign this year is called Dimes for Story Times. So again, go to travelingstories.org if you want to donate. My good friend Tim here donated a couple hours of literacy to a child. So $7 funds.
I want to know what child it was.
You want to know which child?
Recording of that child.
You want to know which child?
Yeah.
$7 is 1 hour of literacy for a child that reads with a reading mentor at Traveling Stories. We, I believe, are at about $20,000 of our $25,000 goal. So if we can hit that, we truly celebrate at Traveling Stories. We celebrate all of our wins. We get very excited. Okay, so we're at $19,672 of our $25,000 goal. We're almost there. It helps when a nonprofit, especially a grassroots nonprofit like us, can start the new year on top of the world, hitting their financial goals. That's a big help. So again, reading mentors are needed, volunteers are needed. And if you have a reluctant reader who's in 1st through 3rd grade and you live in the United States, sign up to be part of our program. Our next program, it begins January 25th and 26th, and it runs 9 weeks. They will be paired with a reading mentor who is trained. The reading mentor will find stories the child likes. And if they absolutely still hate reading, there's literary games. There's fun to be had, and they get to earn book bucks to purchase prizes. Our prizes are really cool. They include the LOL dolls. They include Legos. Right now, the hit, I think the big, or maybe it's my favorite, maybe I'm projecting onto children, the microphone. We have a microphone that children really seem to like. And it's a microphone where you can do like karaoke, and it's a Bluetooth, so you can literally sing along with the song. I have, I may have done that in the office. So yeah, basically those are the ways to be involved. Volunteer, reading mentoring, families are part of our community with reluctant readers, sign your children up, and financial help is always needed when you work with a nonprofit. So again, we're a grassroots organization who rely on the help of both volunteers and finances.
Okay. So I think that was probably answering the final question as well, which is like how can people get in touch with you and the rest of it? But
how can people find us? Travelingstories.org is the best way to get in touch with us, to get in touch with me because you want to sign up to be a reading mentor or be part of our community. It's Christelle at travelingstories.org. That's my email. And then I can forward your email on if you want to be part of the programs. If you have any questions at all, I can get you to the right person. So that's the best way. And Tim, you've been a help as well. You actually donated to several hours of literacy for children. I'm not sure you're gonna get to see exactly who, but if you go to our YouTube, actually, we have stories that children have. We've interviewed children. And they tell a bit of their stories about the power of working with a reading mentor and why the reading mentor is fun and why they like being part of Traveling Stories. So you can go look at our YouTube channel. Just look for Traveling Stories. I think there's a couple there, but you'll find our logo and that kind of thing. It'll match up with our website. So that's that, Tim.
Okay. Well, thanks for the people who watched. I'm not sure. I'm not the numbers that I see at the top of the thing are never entirely reliable. So I know we had a couple of people on. And then
we're going to we'll show some of this probably on the Traveling Stories website and cut it into clips. Some of the good clips that you give us, Tim, we'll definitely show it on the Traveling Stories website.
I've got the clip art, so to speak. I need to put them somewhere apart from Twitter though. That's at the moment. I'm trying to work out how to do that. I haven't got around to it yet. But I've got lots and lots of clips. I've got like 1,500 clips from our episodes now. It's just a case of what on earth to do with them all.
That is a lot of clips.
I'm going to try and repurpose them into YouTube Shorts, but the trouble is YouTube Shorts have to be under a minute in length. Okay. So I've got lots of 1 minute, 2 minute clips.
I mean, you've done some marketing help for a lot of our guests. Those are excellent little marketing clips.
Yeah.
For guests.
Not that hardly anybody's used them, but it's there you go.
Well, guess what, Tim? We might just use them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You can be the case study. It's like, it's the Traveling Stories cliporama.
Well, you know what's funny is an organization like Traveling Stories doesn't necessarily have the funds to market. So we have to learn how to market ourselves, and we have to learn how to be creative at marketing. And so any help like that is a gift to a nonprofit.
Well, I mean, this is actually, funny enough, one of the things, we're going off topic here on the thing, but it's our show, so we can do that. One of the things that surprised me a lot about people in the online business space is a lot of people outsource stuff, and that's a very good thing to do, is to like pay a video editor or pay a person to do your live stream for you, pay a thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But for a lot of non-profit and starting off entrepreneurs, they can't afford to pay somebody else to do it. And there's lots of good free tools and ways to do things out there. But a lot of people aren't interested because they're like, well, why do I need to know about video editing or creating clips? I pay somebody to do that. And it's like, well, yeah, but maybe that person who you're paying to do it doesn't know how to do it without spending all of their day doing something they could do in an hour with the right tool. So anyway, that's a aside.
We'll talk about that another time, but creative marketing is huge.
I know. Yeah, I know. It's like, and there's so many tools out there, and but there's also a lot of, I would use the British word twaddle out there about marketing and online marketing. And
what did you say?
Twaddle. It's a UK.
What does that mean?
Rubbish, incoherent stuff that's deliberately untrue. Basically.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure twaddle's not really lies. It's just not true. So somebody can be saying it thinking that it's like, oh yeah, if you eat red vegetables, then you grow taller or whatever. That would be twaddle because it's just like thing. So anyway, ask James what twaddle means when you
ask him when I see him.
I think it's falling out of fashion actually now. I haven't heard people say the word twaddle for a long time, but maybe it's It may be a word that actually does come back into fashion, and we can send across the Atlantic.
We'll see if we can bring it back.
Yeah, bring back twaddle. Anyway, on that note, it's been fantastic to interview you, to plug the new old charity that you work for.
Thank you, Tim. And I'm going to interview you soon. Yeah. Put your name in, and I can interview you.
Yeah, well, I could talk about Book Chat Live, which I'm actually lining up a whole series of interviews in the new year. We're going to do season 3. Season 2 only had 2 episodes, so it was like, because it's quite hard getting people to give me all their book recommendations. All these people booked in haven't given me their book recommendations, but at least they're booked in. So
Tim has Book Chat Live, where he talks to avid readers or authors and anyone who loves literacy. This is something that they might enjoy listening to.
Yeah.
So I'll have to interview you, Tim.
Yeah, I've got a lot of book recommendations out of that show from people. I've got a large backlog of books to read or listen to on audiobook or do something with. I tend to listen on audiobook, which is really cheating a bit, but it's a good way to get through a lot of books in a shortish time, especially non-fiction.
It's quite good. It's quite interesting. I've listened to a couple episodes, so
yeah,
it's quite good.
Anyway, next week, as you didn't know until I told you, despite I thought we'd agreed to it, we are going to do the Oh No, Not Another Live Show awards, which could be for 2022, but it could be for any time on the show, because I thought, well, let's do an awards show. So I don't know what the categories are going to be yet. I don't know who's going to win it. I might send you over some categories and then just tell you, have some nominations, nominate some people. Oh, well, I could nominate and you could pick the winner, and vice versa for some categories. I don't know. So,
we could do that. We could have our audience help us choose too.
Yeah, well, anybody's got any ideas for categories, then put them in the comments of this show. Obviously, it kind of helps if it's before next week, because we'd have done the show by then. But yeah, next week's going to be the award show. So,
yay!
So,
all right. I will see you next week, Tim. I'll see everyone next week. Bye. Have a good week. Happy holidays.
Bye.
This is what God requires.